All right. Well, hello, everyone. I'm Sharon Graves. I'm Vice President of Photographic Arts Council Los Angeles. We're here for the second annual of Picture a Minute event, which is one of our favorite things to do. It's a chance for us to get together and see the power of photography as manifested in one single image from many of our friends and collaborators that means something to them. It's going to be shared with you today. If you don't know about Photographic Arts Council, we're a nonprofit organization dedicated to fostering the art of fine art photography in Los Angeles and beyond. And this is one of the great ways that we get to do that. I am now going to turn this over to our board president, Michael Dawson, who will say a few words to welcome you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for all attending this wonderful event. For those of you who don't know anything about PAC or the Photographic Arts Council Los Angeles, we are an 11-year-old organization that supports the art and practice of fine art photography in a space without exclusion. We have 3 levels of membership, beginning with a student educator level of $50. We organize over 30 events a year for members. We have a travel program to photo communities and events around the world. Additionally, we produce 4 free online events a year, and we have 4 free public events throughout Southern California. Public events and the online events are a great way to get a sense of the organization, and we'd love to have you join us at one of those. Your membership, should you decide to join us, it really sustains the organization, and we hope that you will support us.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you so much, everybody, and welcome to all our speakers and members and viewers. And this is a really exciting project that we've been working on, and I think you're all going to enjoy it today. So our program is not completely unique. It's a presentation based on a project that was conceived 40 years ago by Belgian photographer and filmmaker Agnès Varda. Many of you know Varda from her unusual films and documentaries, and I'm sure many of you saw the marvelous retrospective of her work here in Los Angeles at LACMA in 2014, and also many of her beautiful images earlier this year at the Fahey Klein Gallery. And Varda began her career as a still photographer, actually, before she began experimenting with film, and had already established her reputation as a surrealist and the godmother of the French New Wave before 1983, when she turned to television. So, Une Minute pour une Image, 1 minute for one image, was an experimental TV series that she created, made up of 1.5-minute episodes of Agnès and her friends presenting photographs and discussing their thoughts and feelings about the works. And the show ran on French television nightly at 11 p.m. during early to mid 1983. And her aim over the 170 episodes she created was to show how a single photograph can elicit wildly different responses. She sometimes described the photos, she read poetry, she sang, she introduced new ways for her audience to look at images, and she forced their eyes in new directions. The images often seem to be chosen at random. Some were artful, some were personal, some were newsy, and indeed they were a highly curated group of photographs. Une Minute pour une Image was a great example of Varda's artistic qualities. She crossed boundaries between media and with playfulness and love, and always showed great empathy for the most intimate thoughts of others. She felt that viewing photographs gave her space and a time for dreaming, which I, and I'm sure many of you, have often related to. When we view images, like Varda's own mosaic self-portrait, we're often looking for something to connect with. Some reason why a picture is pulling at us. Can we see the mosaic self-portrait now? We're looking for reasons to connect with us. Some reason why a picture pulls at us. What's the context? Why are we uncomfortable? Why are we so thrilled? What's actually going on here? How did she do this? So tonight we're mimicking Varda and presenting the 21st century PAC version of A Picture a Minute, featuring some of our friends sharing some of their favorite and inspirational images. And many of our friends take photographs, some critique them, some collect them, and many teach about them. Some of the images they have chosen you may have seen before, and some not. Each of the photographs are special, chosen because they hold a particular significance, something to be shared, and something for all of us to learn. As photography lovers, we're all familiar with this concept of looking deeply and looking with new eyes. And it's really one of the greatest pleasures of viewing art with friends, like today, viewing something you may have seen many times before and coming away with new angles and new stories to not just deepen, but also widen our understanding of not just imagery, but of ourselves too. 60 seconds is not a long time, but I hope you will take each minute today to look deeply and listen for new interpretations and insights. I think Agnès would be pleased with our program today, and I'm excited to honor her in this way. So let's begin. Michelle Dunmarsh.
Yes, hello. Thanks everyone for being here today. This photograph by India Beale is titled Sabrina and Katrina 2015 from the series Am I What You're Looking For? It was exhibited in New York City at APAD and in Seattle in 2018 and was published in India's first monograph performance review released by Minor Matters in 2020. It was also published in my book, Seeing Being Seen, A Personal History of Photography in 2022. This series is, in my opinion, the most important American work of the 21st century thus far, as Carrie Mae Weems' Kitchen Table series defined the late 20th century. And this is a signature portrait from the series. When, as a woman of color in leadership, I feel erased or ignored, this photograph holds me with a sense of community. And when I feel strong and empowered, it mirrors that sense of strength and optimism back to me. I'm so honored to live with this work, which was gifted to me by India in 2018. Congratulations to PAC LA on their 11th anniversary, and thanks for having me today.
Alex Fierro.
T.A. Corinne, Untitled, 1975. I originally selected a different image, but I luckily met and was invited to Chantal Weber's gallery in LA. She mentioned the estate of photographer T.A. Corinne, who I hadn't heard of before, an amazing lesbian photographer who had not been really given her due, much like her contemporaries. Immediately, I connected to Corinne's warm view of women, so lovingly captured, natural, all shapes, creeds, free from judgment. Tightly framed solarized images and striking kaleidoscopic collages, a whirlwind of free-flowing love. Taken primarily in the 70s, Corinne could only share her body of work at community spaces like dive bars and was not supported by the mainstream art world regime. Though society was not open to her expression of love and community, she still actively produced work until her passing and saved every morsel of ephemera. So today I share her name and her work with you today in our community that welcomes all.
Allegro Yang.
Hi everyone, I'm Allegro Yang. This candid photography that I'm showing was taken in 1969, titled Priscilla by an American photographer, Joseph Sabo. A teenage girl with a freshly lit cigarette swung loosely in her mouth is tucking her shirts before she makes her way to somewhere on the beach, which I can vaguely recognize, albeit the shallow depth of field. It's one of those moments to which the parents barely have any access about their kids in adolescence. She is doing something that she's not supposed to do at this young age, but she looks so content doing it. Growing up, I was told by my parents that smoking cigarettes, drinking alcohol, and sex are acts of defiance, but most of us do it anyway. The more I turn mid-20s, the more I think about the term defiance, as in secretly or overtly protesting against parenthood in this case. But why does it always have to be about the parents, but not ourselves? It is one of the very photography that speak to me when I think about who I am as a person, beyond solely being someone else's someone. I also have some candid pictures of me smoking as a teenager, and I thought it was cool, and I still think it is cool. Now I sometimes smoke and I try to take pictures of it, but it's not as cool. The picture-perfect proof of the fleeting moments are frozen in time, and none of which can become the same ever again.
Becky Smith.
Hi, everybody. Becky Smith here. Girl with Stamp on Her Eye, circa 1986, is a platinum palladium print from an 8x10 negative shot with a large format camera, which was actually built by a dentist. American photographer Andrea Modica periodically staged and photographed a family in rural upstate New York who moved from farmhouse to farmhouse over a 15-year period. The photograph electrified me the first time I viewed it and continues to do so 30+ years later. My early childhood exposure to poverty of rural Iowa farmers, including my grandparents, brushed up against the rich world of the imagination I lived in when I was on their farm, including playing in the outhouse. The child in this photograph uses an older sister's shoes, much too large, and a found postage stamp to decorate and transport herself from the dirt and bare necessities of the farmhouse to a world of fantastic possibilities and pleasures. Thank you, Michael, Sharon, Robert, Michael, everybody for making this possible.
Carolyn Peter.
Greetings. Théophile Gautier and Eugène Pio, two Frenchmen in their late 20s, set off on an adventure to Spain in 1840, just months after the daguerreotype process had been introduced. The photographs they made of Spain's spectacular cultural riches validated the promised potential of this revolutionary new technology. In Granada, they spent days and nights in the historic Islamic palace, the Alhambra. Gautier described in detail its architecture and the awe-inspiring experiences they had there in his 1843 book, Voyage in Spain. Clearly conscious of the magical powers of light, Pio and Gautier ably harnessed it, working in concert with chemicals and a camera to produce this astounding image. The figure, likely Gautier, leaned against the fountain for support throughout an exposure over several minutes, while Pio probably stood behind his tripod, taking in his friend and the grandeur of the Alhambra. Thank you.
Caesar Ueda.
Near their tent in Hollywood, Mackenzie Trahan stares off as her boyfriend Eddie rests his hand on her stomach. In 2023, Christina House of the LA Times was awarded the Pulitzer Prize for her intimate look into the life of a pregnant 22-year-old woman. Too many of us live under the misconception that the main cause of homelessness is addiction or mental health, when economists have resoundingly concluded that in today's world, the main cause is simply the rents are too high. We now find ourselves fighting for the soul of our city. However, you and only you have the power to decide the outcome. Do we continue to allow corporate developers to force around 80,000 people in LA County to live on the streets? Or do we finally decide enough is enough? Enough with unchecked greed, enough with indifference, enough with spending billions of dollars to end homelessness, yet getting nowhere. By voting yes on Prop 33, we will finally give our city leaders the power to expand rent control and to make California that beacon of hope where anyone can once again dream of a better life.
Craig Kroll.
Russell Fee was traumatized by the horrific World War II Battle of Culloden. After the war, back home in Iowa, he would roust his young son, James Fee, with pistols and shouts of "Up and at 'em." Later, during Vietnam, the father insisted that the son enlist. James refused. His father chased him around town, but James drove to San Francisco. It was the summer of love. He even met Janis Joplin. A few years later, his father, Russell, committed suicide. In the late 90s, James went to Peleliu several times in a cathartic exploration, photographing the remnants of that battle, including this submerged plane he called Aluminum Shark. Much of Fee's work is dark, but he said there is always light, and the light means hope. When James Fee died in 2006, we held a memorial in my gallery. The night before, as I was sleeping, the phone rang. It was James, and he said, "Don't forget to tell him about the light."
Daniel Miller.
Hi, this is a photograph taken by an artist named Christian Lemaire in Paris, as you might imagine. I found it in a rare discovery at a friend's frame shop in Paris. I was there actually to get some framing work done. It was one of those moments that just stopped me cold. And I find any great photograph has the ability to just stop whatever you're doing and to pull your attention in from it. I thought I'd seen it before. I went through the list of suspects. I thought who might have taken it, Buba, maybe it was Duano, Ronas, et cetera. And it was this guy that I'd never heard of, and no one's ever heard of him, Christian Lemaire. And he's 92 years old now and a fantastic artist. And I'm in love with a photo. When I see it every day, I'm happy to walk by it. And I think that's the mark of a great photo is every day, if you can walk by it and get some joy from it, you've got a great photo. Thank you.
David Sirik.
Lee Godey was a self-taught artist who first appeared on the steps of the Chicago Art Institute in the late 1960s and proclaimed herself a French impressionist far greater than Cézanne. Lee lived on the streets of Chicago in transient hotels, and over the next 25 years went on to produce a prolific body of work, mostly paintings of society women, emphasizing their beauty and glamour. From early on, the paintings were collected by some of the city's top collectors, who displayed them alongside the likes of Dubuffet, Magritte, and Calder. Lee eventually felt that the work was so beautiful that no one would believe that she created it. So she began sewing photographs of herself onto the paintings as a visual signature. Lee found what she called a public camera, a photo booth in the Trailways bus station that made one-off 4x5 images. Lee made around about 100 of these photographs, transforming herself with props that she brought with the money from the sale of her paintings. Things like silver goblets, dozens of roses, or other symbols of wealth and beauty. She would manipulate the photos in camera by adding instant iced tea mix to her face to get a desired darkened effect, then embellish the photos with the ballpoint pen to add details to her eyelashes, lips, and cheeks, to transform herself into one of the society women that she painted, solidifying her place in the history of photographic self-portraiture.
Douglas Bush.
Hello, everybody. This image by Lee Friedlander is a self-portrait in New Orleans in 1968. I've had this image for 20 years. I had seen it originally with Art Sinzabal and Reed Estabrook, and it's always that little Polaroid in the middle that gets me. And I have started a series of self-portraits called Little Black Books, which you can see on my website, where I had done a book on self-portraits very similar to this. And it's this image that caused me to move forward doing self-portraits. So that's what it is. Thank you so much.
Douglas Marshall.
In January 1941, 20-year-old Edward Long set out from rural Pennsylvania for the adventure of a lifetime. He was an amateur photographer with a fresh business degree, and having studied Portuguese, he joined an excursion to travel along the entirety of the Amazon River by boat. Over 4 months, he visited villages and towns. He interacted with indigenous fishermen and animals and wrote poetry about the meaning of life. During the trip, he made 75 6x9 exposures and eventually produced 3 hand-bound albums of contact prints with typewritten captions and 1 singular 5x7 enlargement, which you see here showing the railings of the riverboat framing sunrise on the Amazon. Edward was my maternal grandfather, and after the war, he was part of the Army Special Intelligence Corps in South America, where unfortunately during this time, he contracted a disease that would eventually cause his death in 1957, shortly before my mother was born and at the same age as myself today. My mother has very few objects of the father she never met, but from what little we do have, we can see a decent man who cared deeply for the fruits of life and adventure. We're currently working to conserve the negatives from his trip, which I have, and hopefully to publish a small book. I absolutely treasure this lone print that we know exists. It's wrinkled and creased and has terrible silvering effects of the chemistry. Even more reasons to love it as an object and a testament to photography's power to connect us across generations.
Emily Bierman.
My photograph is this rare early gelatin silver print by Lee Miller from 1930, one of only 2 known prints of the image. It depicts a female torso with her back turned towards the camera. She's set against a rich, luscious background, the softness of the printing mirroring the gentle curves of the body. She's captured the torso folded in on itself as if it were headless, a marble slab, at once reminiscent of a Brancusi or Henry Moore sculpture or a vegetable still life by Edward Weston. It is still entirely Miller's own. The image epitomizes her experimental images that she made while living and working with Man Ray, her lover and teacher, in the early 1930s in Paris. Taken, however, with the rare perspective of a woman, it still embodies the surrealist obsession with the female torso, with the female nude. I wrote my senior thesis in college on Lee Miller, and many years later, I was lucky enough to sell this very photograph at Sotheby's in 2021. I still lie awake at night thinking about this photograph and hoping to discover something equally as magnificent again in the future. Thank you.
Hannah Sloan.
In the 1980s, Claudia Gordillo was a war correspondent alongside Susan Meiselas at the official newspaper for the Sandinistas in Nicaragua. On the front lines, she documented civilians in the crossfire of a bloody conflict. She then turned her lens on indigenous communities of her country's central coast, joining efforts to preserve their disappearing culture. She sought out ancestral faces of rare indigenous people of the Ulua community, whose women are known for their beauty. One day, she encountered Jovita Knight, who we see here, who agreed to be photographed with the permission of her husband. The day they met, Jovita's hair was tied up in a traditional bun. But the day of the shoot, Jovita let her hair fall in a dramatic cascade, leaving Claudia surprised and delighted. Today, Claudia Gordillo lives in fear under an oppressive dictatorship. She is limited in both action and expression. It is my privilege to present her work to you so that her voice will not be silenced. Thank you.
Yasot Tapoji.
This image shows a white line cutting across the horizontal plane. 2 outstretched wings fly out from the center to beyond the sides of the print, an abstraction of a flight. The spread of the wings is formed by a person standing in the middle of a long unrolled bolt of silk cloth. Through the fabric, you can see the body, the legs, the arms, and the head. The performer is moving, and this movement changes the shape of the cloth and what it can represent. Here, it appears as the ancient winged victory of Samothrace, or perhaps the attempted flight of Icarus. With a lot of different ideas in mind, for the artist who conceived this performance, this was a way to pay tribute and celebrate the last remaining bolt of silk she could work with. Thank you.
Janet Kahn.
This is Catherine Opie's photograph of her colleague and artist, Mary Kelly. I first saw this photograph at Kathy's show at Reagan in 2003. It was a portrait show, but this in particular literally took my breath away. portraits ideally reveal a sense of a person's presence and individual identity. This photo with reference to Baroque portraiture is especially striking. In its black oval frame, which isn't totally visible here, you see the dramatic interplay of light and color. And there's a particular intimacy in the way Kathy captures Mary from her back, revealing her strong hands fixing her signature bun, creating a portrait for us which truly manifests Mary's unique presence.
Jennifer DiCarlo.
Hi, I chose this photograph by Alex Soth. It's the very first photograph that I ever acquired. I loved his work, but I was still in my 20s at the time and I couldn't afford anything that I'd seen. And one year after tax season, I thought, well, I have a little money back. I contacted his gallery and asked, well, this is my budget. Do you have anything? And they sent a few pieces as suggestions. And this was one that was on it. I'm sitting with it here. I still love this work. It packs so much in. It captures the essence of the project it's from. I feel as still a springboard thesis to how I feel about organized religion, the American condition, the connectedness and disconnectedness between us. It engages layers of history and time, use and neglect, course of empire. There's an Augustus Caesar bust, a sticker like on the back of one of the sheets of this Bible study book. That's very heavily used. There's a debris-filled screen. There's an individually wrapped slice of bread, something strange and unusual, next to a menacing knife. These two things shouldn't need one another. The overturned wine glasses in the background were one of the things that kind of was like a personal connection hook for me. My grandmother had that same etched wine glass, and I just thought how people can be so close and so different. It speaks a lot to disbelonging and belonging, connected and disconnected. And I still feel this energy is like so embodied in this work. It's so alive for me.
Catherine Bard.
My photo is by Deborah Medici Guetta. It's titled Harmony of Chaos 2016. I've been fascinated by Deborah's work since I first saw it about 4 years ago. Each complete photograph is unique. It's made up of many different images woven together, creating a vibrant, chaotic urban landscape. Buildings are leaning every which way while somehow hanging together. The foreground is littered with cars, outdoor restaurants, and people who appear to be just going with the flow. The image is a sum of many different parts, creating a whole, reflecting how modern life can feel. Every time I look at it, I find something different. It's like a different photograph each time. It's very, very special. I wanted to add that Deborah has graciously invited PAC to visit her studio here in LA. It's really an amazing studio, and I hope we can make that happen. And if we can, please contact me and I will put you in touch with Deborah. Thank you very much.
Kevin Scholl.
Thank you for having me. This is a photograph by Bryson Rand titled Jack at the Sink, Skowhegan, 2019, from his series, The Shadow Has a Dream. My partner and I have been fortunate enough to live with this image in our home for a few years now. The photo leans into voyeuristic territory, as the close crop implicates us as the viewers standing directly behind Jack's shoulder, watching him escape the summer heat sink. While there, we're invited to revel in the incredible textures captured, from the rough surfaces of the paint-modeled faucet and the stubble from a fresh haircut, to the softness of revealed skin and the flow of water trickling around and down his ear, brushing the cheek and jumping off into a solitary droplet suspended in time. For me, this image encapsulates the heat of long summer days and longing desire. Thank you.
Larry Shear.
Why does one love an image? I found this pictorial portrait in an auction and recognized the photographer, Harold Harvey, from experimentation with film developers. Harvey, born in 1899, was about 19 when this image was taken. From a 1938 Popular Photography interview, I found that he studied fine art and painting. At the age of 17, exhibited 9 photographs in the 1916 San Francisco Salon, and in the 20s studied in Paris with Man Ray. A handful of his commercial and advertising images survive, but he's best known for his invention of panthermic 777 film developer, and he died in 1971. The subject, dancer Ida Foreman, was born in 1895. From 1915 through the 20s, she performed in vaudeville and Broadway revues, most notably with the Denishan Dance Company. In 1919, she posed for this image. To my knowledge, it's the only surviving print.
Marjorie Ornston.
I came upon this series of images by Inga Morath and Saul Steinberg in my research for a photo book show, which is happening next year up at the Getty Library, and I have not stopped going gaga for them ever since. After a career in Europe as a Magnum photographer, Inga Morath, who was born in Austria and raised throughout the war in Germany, was now living in New York. In 1958, she met Saul Steinberg, the well-known New Yorker cartoonist. When she showed up to shoot his portrait, he opened his apartment door wearing one of these wacky paper bag masks over his head. And thus began a many years long series of images with friends and family posing and relaxing naturally as they would at an Upper West Side dinner party, only with paper bags on their heads. Aside from being absolutely hysterical, these staged surrealist portraits shot in a formal style both enhance and strip away at our humanity. By removing their faces, we're forced to focus on their clothing, their demeanor, the tiniest turn of a foot here or a hand put there. We know who these people are, and we embrace their portraits, just as we would our own family photos. Morath published more than 30 monographs during her lifetime and took hundreds of portraits. None, for me, is as delightful and wonderful as this one. Mary Beth Heffernan.
Cut from a magazine, floating free of context, dog-eared after decades. It pricks, it pangs. JD, don't let him go. Don't let me go. Ravishing youth of the raft of Medusa, St. Peter crucified upside down, my father's crew cut from 1967. It hums at my frequency. It knows me. It's all in plain sight, but yet it's slipping away. Little did I know my private love earned Morabito the Pulitzer in '68. A ball turret gunner in World War II, he was no stranger to hanging upside down in mortal danger. A year after J.D. Thompson breathed life back into Randall Champion, Glenn Campbell crooned Wichita Lineman, whose melancholic major sevenths, suspended fourths, and unresolved major chords, like Morabito's photo, leave us hanging.
Matthew Brandt.
I selected this image because I had an assignment about 20 years ago as an undergrad to select one image to talk about at an ICP exhibition. And I did some digging, and this was the photograph that I originally talked about. And I remember when I did the talk, feeling like I failed the picture. I didn't express what I wanted to express or what I was interested in it. And I feel like to a certain extent, me representing this in this context, selecting one image is some sort of closure for me. But I think also it speaks to this idea for me that really good photographs kind of always leave you hanging, and there's always more to talk about, and shouldn't feel bad for it, I guess. Thank you.
Michael Dawson.
Discharged from military service in 1945, Max Yavno headed west with plans to resume his career in photography. Yavno studied at the Photo League in New York, bringing his documentary social justice vision to Los Angeles direct from the streets of New York. Through his association with social worker and writer Beatrice Griffith, Yavno was introduced to the Mexican-American communities in Southern California. This photograph was taken in Hicks Camp in El Monte sometime in 1945. Homes were built by the families, mostly from repurposed boxcars torn up for their wood and frames. The photograph reminds me of a Walker Evans landscape. But Walker Evans had not yet visited Southern California, only Max Yavno. It illuminates the prevalent landscape of erasure in Southern California and is made whole by its roots in a specific time and place. Hicks Camp, Beatrice Griffith, and Max Yavno all have specific histories tied to this image. Sadly, they cannot be covered in the space of a minute.
Molly Toberer.
This is Otakiti. He was a First Nation author, educator, philosopher, and actor. The eldest son of Standing Bear and Pretty Face, at 5 years old, he witnessed his father return from the Sioux-Pawnee battle in Massacre Canyon, Nebraska. He became Luther Standing Bear at the Carlisle Indian Boarding School in 1879 during the U.S. cultural assimilation experiments. His hair was cut. He was forced to speak English, and his cultural heritage was stripped. He returned to the res only to be unsettled, so he left for Hollywood to work in the motion picture industry. He formed the War Paint Club to properly cast Indigenous actors in films. After 15 films, while on set of Cecil B. DeMille's Union Pacific, he died of the flu. He is buried in the Hollywood Forever Cemetery. I will leave you with his own words. I left reservation life and my native people, the Ogallala Sioux, because I was no longer willing to endure existence under the control of an overseer. For about the same number of years, I had tried to live a peaceful and happy life, tried to adapt myself and make readjustments to fit the white man's mode of existence, but I was unsuccessful. I developed into a chronic disturber. I was a bad Indian. I remained hostile, even a savage, if you please. And I still am. I am incurable. Thank you.
Mona Kuhn.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mona. I'm a photographer and visual artist here in Los Angeles. The work I selected is titled Solarized Eyes by Irving Blumenfeld, dated 1935. While in the darkroom, Blumenfeld disrupted the printing process by adding an unexpected flash of light while the latent image was still developing. I first came across this image at the Getty Research Institute, and later on when Virginia Hackert showed me the samples of solarized prints from their collection. This particular photograph by Blumenfeld caught my attention in a very specific way. From the enigmatic view of her eyes and her dematerialized presence, an abstraction was born, a disruptive process in which an imperfection became the work of art. It was a great source of inspiration for my own series, King's Road, and I would like to end with a short quote. It goes, "An excuse to record, a desire to retrace, an attempt to cross time and space." Thank you for having me.
Nick Fahey.
Hey everybody, this photograph is of B.J. Robinson in 1982 by photographer George Giroux. He was a New Orleans-based photographer and painter who worked and has had a lasting impression on the fine art photography industry. Best known for his black and white portraits, Giroux often focused on marginalized subjects, including disabled individuals, veterans, amputees, and Black men. His intimate, humanizing approach challenged traditional notions of beauty, presenting the subjects with dignity and compassion. Drawn heavily on classical aesthetics of Greco-Roman sculpture and Renaissance painting, Giroux's compositions fused elegance with an unconventional portrayal of the human body. This juxtaposition of classical ideals with non-traditional subjects pushed boundaries in the art world, questioning social norms of physical perfection and expanding the realm of portrait photography. Giroux's work had a profound influence on later photographers, including Robert Mapplethorpe. By offering space for bodies often excluded from mainstream art, Giroux helped to redefine beauty, inclusivity, and fine art, cementing his legacy as a pioneering figure in photography.
Paula Ely.
Hi, everyone. There's a saying in Latin America, calladita te ves más bonita. Keep quiet, you look prettier. In this piece from 2022, Tatiana Parcero is saying, calladita no me veo. I don't see myself keeping quiet. She's known for work that incorporates self-portraits layered with imagery that references identity or our relationship with the natural world. In this piece, she's taken a decidedly political turn. She is facing the camera, she's looking us directly in the eye, and she's layered this self-portrait with images from demonstrations for women's rights, along with the defiant text. Latin American women have been fighting for their rights for decades and have recently scored some major victories, winning the federal right to legal abortions in Mexico and Argentina. Mexico has just sworn in its first woman president. In the US, women's rights are being rolled back. We must not see ourselves keeping quiet.
Ronnie Singh.
I chose this photograph of Thomas DeMond's vault from 2012 because in this day and age of artificial intelligence, when the veracity of an image routinely comes into question, Thomas DeMond invites us to reflect on the very idea of objective truth, or what is a photograph. His work straddles both sculpture and photography, and he starts by choosing found images, usually from archives or the media, that have historical or cultural significance, which he then translates into life-size paper models for the sole purpose of photographing them with a large format camera. Once they've been photographed, the models are destroyed, and the result is an uncanny hybrid image, a photograph that is both a document of the artist's process and a reconstruction of a pre-existing reality. It can seem convincingly real or strangely artificial. And Vault is based on a police photograph of a storeroom from the Wittgenstein Institute in Paris, where 30 paintings and sculptures that had been missing for decades were discovered during a police raid in 2011. And if you're interested in learning more about Thomas DeMond, I'd recommend checking out his website, which is very comprehensive. It shows individual artworks with detailed shots and process drawings and related contextual information. And currently, right now, there's a show of his lithographs in LA at Gemini Gel, and it's up until November 29th. So check it out.
Rose Shoshana.
Hi there. Hi, everyone. I chose this photograph as an homage to Graciela. For me, my relationship with Graciela has probably been the most profound and significant of any of the artists that I've worked with. When I first visited her studio in the mid-1990s, this was hanging in her bathroom, and every time I visited her house, I would just be fascinated by it. So the original photograph was taken in 1962. It's her wedding picture. Years later, in the early 1970s, when she first began working and collaborating with the artist Francisco Toledo, Francisco asked her if he could borrow the photograph, and he brought it back to her with a painting of the frog sitting comfortably on her head. In Francisco's Zapotec culture, the frog is a symbolic creature that is thought to be a spirit guide. The frog is meant to help people connect with their true selves and to guide them through their life. Priscilla was undergoing enormous changes in her life, stepping away from her well-known conservative family and moving toward her life as an artist. I believe the frog was Francisco's way of giving her a spirit guide for her new life. So in a way, having worked with both artists, this is kind of, I wanted to present it to our group as an homage to Graciela. Thank you so much.
Rotem Rosenthal.
Thank you for having me. Wonderful to hear about all of these images. Israeli photojournalist and documentarian Miki Kratzman was named by ICP as one of 50 international concerned photographers in 2016 for his commitment to human rights. He dedicated his career to documenting the occupied territories in Israel and Palestine, and his last book was dedicated to the hardships endured by Bedouins. I returned to his work again and again while researching my monograph that was published in 2023. On October 7 of 2023, his aunt Ophelia was kidnapped from her home in Kibbutz Nir Oz by Hamas terrorists. He says they still spoke on the phone that morning at 9:30 a.m. On November 28 of last year, almost 1 year ago, she returned home. Many hostages were not that lucky, among them young children and vulnerable individuals. This picture was taken in her neighborhood at Kibbutz Nir Oz days after the attack. It is now included in the exhibition I curated, Album from the South, currently shown at Sinai Temple here in LA. The exhibition includes works by Israeli photographers who captured the Western Negev area before, after, and during October 7. All the works are for sale and all proceeds will go directly to the artists. Thank you for the opportunity to share this work with you.
Scott B. Davis.
When I first read Ansel's autobiography, I remember pausing at a piece of correspondence from Edward Weston in which he wrote, "Got a beautiful negative of a fresh corpse." This began an obsessive search for information about Weston's photograph. My first stop was the public library, where 2 newspaper articles from 1937 described a photographer named Everett Weston, who'd photographed a corpse in a remote desert location. The man, named Grover C. Sutton, had been a private in the Army and was born in Johnson City, Tennessee. Years of research have yielded little information about his life, though I learned he was laid to rest on my birthday, a few miles from my house. It will come as no surprise to those who know me that I've visited his grave many times. I've performed the photograph as a tableau vivant and slept in the identical location and position of the dead man. I've taken many people to visit the site, including photographers, curators, historians, and curious individuals among them. I own a print of this image, and I'm happy to keep Grover's memory alive. Thank you.
Siri Carr.
The artist Liko Shiga created this picture during her time living in the small rural community of Kitakama, Japan, where she was invited to become the village photographer to record religious festivals and other celebrations. This image is flamboyant, maximalist, and expressionistic, effects created by her use of a slow shutter speed mixed with direct flash and colored gels. We see the ash of an unseen fire swirl, blurred by the slow time. We see a couple holding hands, wading through a purple swamp bordered by green grass. Who are they? Is this a moment of joy or escape from ominous forces that lurk just beyond the picture frame? This area was badly hit by the tsunami of 2011. The village was largely destroyed. So this work now performs a memorializing function, proof of what was and what may no longer be. The overall feeling in the image is of darkness and uncertainty, but surreal colors and the gesture of the couple holding hands bring hope, gloom, but also ecstasy, a distillation of the way I feel living in our fraught moment. Thank you.
Stephen White.
Robert Capa may have been the greatest war photographer who ever lived, and this image, I believe, encapsulates all the uncertainty of war. I have a collection of over 150 Capa photographs, but none are in my Americana Rare Book and Photo Sale I'm holding at Hinman's auction on October 24th. The catalog is online. When I look at this photograph, I see a shaky camera portraying a man headed into the fog of war. What could define war more than that? It was taken during the Spanish Civil War. His most famous war image is also from the Spanish Civil War, a soldier shot as he runs down a hill. But that image, which the photographer Hansel Meath told me Kappa claimed was an accident, does not have the power of the one you are looking at. This is every man, shaking as he walks into the unknown of every war. Kappa died covering the Indochina War for Life magazine in 1954 when he stepped on a landmine. Thank you.
Iwe Lu.
This image on screen and behind me is Salt, Pepper, and Fire, created in 1980 by Joanne Callis. Many of you are probably familiar with her. She's not only a renowned LA photographer, but also a fellow member of PAC. Joanne's work delves into the dramatic, erotic, and psychological layers of domestic life. I really connected with this piece during the COVID pandemic. I collected from Rose Gallery, and it's been something I look at every day since. Before the pandemic, I never really thought myself as a very domestic person. My generation of women is fortunate. We're not confined to indoor spaces like those before us, but the lockdown changed that. And being stuck inside was very hard for me mentally. This photo gave me strength. It presents a beautiful indoor scene, salt, pepper, and coffee, but with fire burning in the background and a bird flying by. It feels both dangerous and alive, reminding me that even with limits, there is energy, tension, and potential. Joanne's work helped me to see the domestic world and of any refinement not as a limitation, but as a place where power comes from within. You can make magic even where boundaries are in place.
Michael Hawley.
Sirkka-Liisa Kantanen is a photographer originally from Finland who lives in Northern England. She was the only woman in a group of photographers in the 70s, 80s called the Amber Collective that included such greats as Chris Killip, Graham Smith, and Martin Parr. These men photographed difficult times in pubs and streets in their bleak northern towns, but Sirkka focused on working women and their complicated lives, their children, their efforts and victories to keep the spirit bright. Here are two friends coming home from work on a September day. I imagine them looking at the waves and saying to each other, "Let's do it," then falling back in gales of laughter. With this photograph, I wanted to remind us of something that during these difficult and fractured times, this photograph always tells me that we must remember to see each other, to be spontaneous, and to leap at joy. As the writer Ian Forster said, always connect. I think that's our only way through. In this vein, Agnès Varda, whose life in photography was based on connection, said, "If we'd only open people up, we'd find landscapes." How about that? Thanks for coming, everybody.
Thank you very much, Michael. Thank you, everybody. I think that was marvelous. So moving. So many of you had so many moving things to share. And I was just taken so many times. I'm really, really thrilled. I want to thank all the participants. I want to thank everybody out there watching us. And I want to turn it over to Michael to talk a little bit more about PAC. And love your photos. Buy art. Enjoy museums. Go to a gallery this weekend. I think you all will make you all very happy. Michael?
That's great, Margie. And thank you, Margie, for organizing this, and particularly Sharon Graves, who was the back end of all of this and put it all together, and Sean for working on the slides every time that we needed to change them and working toward this. So for people who are not familiar with PAC, who are watching today, PAC is a nonprofit organization supporting photography and lens-based art. We're devoted to the ever-evolving conversation around photography, and we offer unprecedented access for our members to visit museums, galleries, studios, and to travel. We actually do about 30 to 40 events a year. Michael Dawson mentioned this earlier, and we've done this every year for more than a decade. So for us to continue to thrive, we really need your support. So if you're not a member, please come and join us, and we'd love to have you. You can find a link about this down in the chat that Sharon is going to put in the chat. And you can come to our website and find out all about us and join on the website. And for our faithful members, the people who have been with us for over a decade, please consider upgrading to being a sponsor. Some of us on this screen are sponsors already, and it's a great opportunity. So thanks again for coming, and we'll look forward to seeing you all at another event, a PAC event soon in person or another one online. Thank you.
Sharon, can you unmute us? Can you unmute us?
Let's see if I can. Let's see. I can ask everyone to unmute.
No, everyone, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you
And
so
just-
much.
Thank
you.
That was really
appreciate.
Yeah.
Wonderful photographs. Wonderful.
Really, very
Thank you,
moving.
guys.
Thanks,
Can
everybody.
anybody,
Yeah.
can you take us a screenshot, Sharon? Is that possible?
Let me
Within, thank you so much.
I grabbed one.
You guys, really very moving. Very profound. A lot of it was quite moving, quite moving. Thank you again. I'm so happy to see you all. I don't get to see a lot of your faces through the year. So this is a great way to connect, and I appreciate each and every one of you.